That was super short, George. Thank you. So speaking of, trying to break down the silos, that's a good way to move into our next session this afternoon, which is with Kendal Chavez. And Chili, you mentioned the work you've been doing with Kendal this last year, and that many of us have been busy with, but Kendal is the Food, Farm, and Hunger Coordinator at the Office of the Governor. I hope I have your title right, Kendal. But with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kendal, who will bring us up to speed on a whole body of work that that brought us through the legislative session. So thank you, Kendal.
Thanks, Denise. And Chili, my dear friend, it's impossible to follow with policy legislative conversations after what you just shared. So just want to say thank you, as always, for just kind of rooting us back into reality. And my presentation is going to be a bit more dry and likely not as inspiring, but and as Denise said, really here just to give you all an update on where we are, where we're going, and just suggest a pathway forward for us all to kind of work together around our food policy work. So Denise, I'm going to share a slide deck if that's okay. Yes, it is. Okay, you all can see just the regular slide, right? Not the one with notes?
Yep, we're good.
Cool. All right, so as Denise mentioned, my role here in the governor's office is to really oversee and help connect and really address that issue, a piece of the issue that Chili's speaking to around an incomplete foundation, systems that aren't speaking to one another, systems that have kind of lost their path, if you will. And my job is to really braid all of our programs and our resources together and make sure that New Mexico is being as progressive and as forward thinking as we can around our food systems and our food security work here in the state. And as you all know, you work with farmers and work in our food system work all over the state, that we have a very interesting challenge here in New Mexico. We know that we import most of our food and we export most of our food. We have a ton of community members and communities who struggle with food security and food insecurity because they just don't have access to healthy, local, high quality food for a number of reasons that we won't get into today. And so our governor really brought me into the staff here to really, again, connect the dots between, well, our food system work. So how do we best support farmers and our ranchers and our food businesses while also addressing food insecurity and our food security issues across the state. And so that's sort of the package or the container for this presentation and for this work in general that many of you have been deeply involved in over the last 6 months. And let's see. So for those of you, I'm going to give a little bit of a background and then jump straight into what happened in this last 30-day session. So for those of you that haven't been involved in the New Mexico Food, Farm, and Hunger Initiative, which is still a mouthful for many of us, and every day I sort of second guess why that is the branding, because it's just a hard one to say. So the New Mexico Food, Farm, and Hunger Initiative started back in June, and we worked with many of you in addition to 200 plus other individuals, farmers, ranchers, nutrition professionals from schools and senior centers, community-based organizations, advocacy organizations, food justice organizations, and then state agencies, as well as legislators, to again, really figure out what that shared pathway forward is so that we could better connect the dots between all of the amazing work happening here. So it's important to say that this work has been a priority of the governor since she came into office. And we know that this has also been a priority through the Food Policy Council and other groups for decades. And so we're building off of a legacy of food policy work here in New Mexico that's been relatively successful over the years. And my charge was to figure out how to make it exponentially more successful and to make sure that all of the partners and parties are really working together towards a common vision, which, as you all know in your work, is a very complicated, challenging thing to do in food systems work in general, because we all come from different perspectives, different parts of the state, and different sort of ways that we look at our food system. So the work more broadly, the Food, Farm, and Hunger Initiative has 4 key goal areas. I won't get into these in depth, but I do just want to flag these for you all. So again, this container for the work that also is the container for our legislative work this past session had 4 key priorities. So one was our community food programs. So looking at ways to improve and innovate our child nutrition programs, for example. So what our kids are eating at schools, to look at how to improve how we're getting food to seniors, specifically in rural and tribal parts of the state, looking at ways to maximize really awesome programs like the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program, and then connecting all those programs to one another. The second is New Mexico Grown. And many of us, when we think of New Mexico Grown, we think of the New Mexico Grown purchasing program that's been a state priority for many years. But this group was really looking at New Mexico Grown more broadly. So how do we support our farmers and our ranchers and our food businesses to grow food with water and land and resources in mind for our institutional programs, for our schools, senior centers, preschools, and also our grocery stores and other outlets where people are buying or consuming food. The third was supply chain. As many of you all know, in communities across the state, New Mexico has some pretty deep perennial challenges around getting food to food insecure people. We have issues with our roadways. We have issues with transportation, lack of trucks and cold storage. We have issues with our systems not talking to one another. And so this group was really looking at supply chain and supply chains more broadly across the state. And then the fourth was thinking about sustainability. So not ecological sustainability that is woven across all of the groups, but really how do we get this plan into motion and sustain it over time? And one of those key priorities is working very closely with the legislature, working very closely with community partners, and making sure that we're constantly assessing how the work is going and then improving it over time. And this is a very messy slide, but I do just want to, again, for those of you that weren't involved in the work, again, the sort of spirit of the work is that we can feed ourselves. So again, looking at food insecurity, issues of food security and food insecurity across the state, and pairing that with the potential that we have to grow food or to retain the food that's grown for New Mexicans versus sending it to export markets. Also, they really recognizing that food security is preventable. And while the work that we're doing at the governor's office is really focused on food systems, we know that there are root causes underneath food insecurity, issues of poverty and other things that we know are all sort of woven into why people don't have consistent access to high quality, culturally relevant, high quality local food. And then the third is that we believe that growing food in communities, specifically rural communities, is an economic driver and should also be something that's protecting our land and our water resources. So this group met over 6 months, and our sort of core outputs we presented to the legislature. We had our budget package for this year that we'll get into in the next part of the presentation, working on finalizing a strategic plan and really working with 12 plus agencies to partner together around budget requests in this session and beyond, as well as key legislation. And again, really honoring that cooperation and partnership and relationship between these entities is the only way that we're going to move this work forward. And so short-term outcomes you can see on the screen in front of you, but again, our long-term outcomes is that we believe that we can feed ourselves and that we have the tools that we need here to address food insecurity and to reduce hunger. So this, and I'll walk you all through the slide. So those of you that were deeply involved in our work here for this last session that just ended last week, we really focused on the budget as a tool for policy change. I think many of us and many people in the food policy space here in New Mexico focus mostly on legislation and then appropriations. And we focused on the back end, really looking at state agencies as being the drivers of these requests and doing it really early on. So I'm going to walk you through this slide. 8 of our 12 state agencies that partnered on the Food, Farm, and Hunger Initiative put in budget requests to support a number of initiatives, which we'll get to later on in the presentation. And their requests were about 15 million in change. The timeline on this was back in September. So our agencies and again, community partners have been working on this for months. And that was the initial sort of proposal around the dollar figure that we thought we needed in the very first year of this initiative, and making sure that they were braided, woven together, and that there was shared data and shared metrics across all of the agencies requesting funds. Then the executive, because this is a priority of the governor, the executive recommendation was just 24.5 million. That included the state agency requests, as well as a $10 million sort of capital outlay or infrastructure grant program for the things that we know we need now and the government doesn't necessarily need to manage. So things like cold storage and buying trucks and transportation and building greenhouses and things like that, and just getting money out into community and addressing these needs now versus waiting to study it, waiting to do needs assessments. We know their needs, and so really allocating and appropriating funds for those needs in the immediate. LFC unfortunately recommended $0 for all of these initiatives. And so we went into the session with that sort of that mindset, and really went in knowing that we were going to have to, even though this is an executive priority, that we were going to have to really work with our legislative body to make sure this was in House Bill 2, or the final budget package for the state. So as we moved into the session, and I won't get too into the weeds for those of you that aren't policy legislative wonks, but we worked with our House Appropriations and Finance Committee, which recommended, you'll see 8.7 million of the total 15 and change that we had originally recommended. Our Senate Finance Committee, dear senators who believe in food and farm work, backfilled the rest of that budget. And we actually ended up with a bit higher than we actually, the executive recommended, at about 24.7 million across 8 agencies, but housed at 1 agency, which I'll get into in a second. So this was sort of the budget process that we went through over the last 30 days. And we're very excited to be where we are now, which is 24.7 million for the Food, Farm, and Hunger Initiative. This does not include funds for other things that are outside of this first year's budget package. This is just for the budget priorities for the Food, Farm, and Hunger Initiative. This is a very boring spreadsheet, but I did just want to give you all a second just to kind of scan this. So we had a number of different programs across 8 agencies. And again, really use the state budget as a tool for innovation versus relying on bills and appropriation requests, knowing that we can do a ton in these programs. We can push our farmers to focus on land and water just through administrative shifts through programs. Not everything has to be legislated. And so this was the initial budget package back right before the session. And so you'll see a number of programs, many of them look familiar. The New Mexico Grown Program, we have our Senior Farmers Market Program, things like Healthy Soil Program, which I realized it should say Healthy Soil Program. NMDA keeps sending me emails about that. We keep using the S at the end there. Programs like Double Up Food Bucks, and then also really recognizing that state government to really step up and do this work with community and to maintain that relationship and this radical accountability, which we are deeply committed to. We need extra staff and we need extra people. And so there's also a handful of FTEs to, again, hold the work together. This is a breakdown of where we landed. And Denise, I'm happy to share this with you afterwards if people want to dig back into this. But we are super, super excited to work with a kind of progressive, innovative way of approaching this budget package. So our office felt strongly about, rather than having, dozens of little tiny programs across 8 agencies with very small budgets, we really wanted them to be a consolidated, comprehensive approach that was sort of managed out of 1 agency and with oversight out of our office. So again, we can say per county, the number of people and the number of meals and the number of sort of intervention points for each of these programs across the state. And we are really excited to say that we're going to put together a public tracking dashboard through Tableau or another platform so that the public can see what's happening, where these funds are going, and how the programs are going. Previous to this effort, for those of you that have been in this policy work or haven't, you would have had to talk to each of these agencies and each of these people separately who may or may not know anything about this other initiative. As an example, as a farmer, if I wanted to access the New Mexico Grown Program for schools, for senior centers, for preschools, Double Up Food Bucks, Healthy Food Financing Initiative, I would have to, again, talk to 5+ agencies with multiple staff people. And so we're really trying to be very strategic and very targeted and focused with this really exciting and once, the largest investment ever that's ever been made in our food system here in the state to make sure that we're doing it right. So this is a breakdown of the programs in each of the agencies and then the dollar amount as they've landed in House Bill 2. And this is just a handful of the highlights. We know that our senior food box program is going to serve at least 3,000 more seniors with weekly meals. We're excited to roll out the fruit and vegetable prescription program in partnership with NMFMA and our partners at COPE and others across the state, and really have the state play a role in getting, increasing access to fruits and vegetables for families, especially families with children, as a means for health, better health, and for food security. Looking to expand our summer and after school nutrition programs, have a really deep focus on college food insecurity, which has been a priority that's sort of risen to the surface over the last few years here in the state and across the country. critical funding for food banks to do more of the great work they're already doing, and then pushing them to do it even more innovatively and even more strategically. Really excited about the 260,000 plus children, preschoolers, and seniors that are going to benefit from the New Mexico Grown program. We're excited to now see that in our preschools and daycares. And then support for farmers, so expansion of the healthy soil programs, support to train and onboard farmers through our approved supplier program, expansion of the Double Up Food Bucks program, and more. And so this is just an initial estimated highlight of some of the impacts that we foresee experiencing over the next year. And so we look forward to kind of circling back on these numbers after some of these programs start to kind of shake out a little bit more. So a few things about what we've learned and where we're going, and then looking forward to having a discussion with you all. So from my perspective, the executive leadership piece is absolutely critical. This is the first time in this state that we've had a governor who really understands the intersections of our food system and is committed to it. So that piece paired with many of us have been partners for 10 plus years. And so I think that partnership also between the executive, our state agencies, and our grassroots partners is also the other piece of the equation here. And the ongoing sort of presence of our grassroots partners at the Capitol and talking to legislators was absolutely critical. And so those two pieces together, from my perspective, is why we landed where we landed. I feel strongly, and I know we feel strongly, that the state budget process is truly an avenue for innovation. And we look forward to continuing to working on this interagency budget request and really pushing our agencies and our programs to be the best they can be through the Food, Farm, and Hunger Initiative by even just shifting the way money is allocated and invested here in the state into our food system. We know that our legislators are all very excited and supportive of this idea of a streamlined, cohesive system and a streamlined, cohesive plan for management. The mechanics at first were a bit confusing to people, but once they understood, it was sort of an aha moment. And every legislator I spoke to was like, this is what we've been looking for 10 years. Thank you. And so that gives me a lot of hope and confidence about future years for this initiative. Many of us learned that the mechanics, as I just mentioned, are really important. Our legislators, some are of the opinion that legislators don't need to understand the mechanics. They just need to understand the how, or the what and the why. And what I learned through this is that they actually need to understand the entire process, how money is going to move, who's managing it, so that they can really, buy into this, again, really innovative, progressive way of looking at our food system. And our legislators have been champions in this. We have our Hunger Caucus members and a handful of members on both the Senate and House side who were pivotal to moving this work forward. And so it's not really something we learn because it's an obvious one, but really, deep partnerships with legislators is really critical to this work as well. And then looking forward, just a quick, update for you all and an invitation for you to participate and join us in this effort. I'm realizing now the sort of gut feeling of like, we've been dreaming about this for 6 months, the first year of this 5-year plan, of this 5-year initiative, and now we're moving into implementation mode. So now all the details must fall into place. And so that's what we're working on the back end out of the governor's office, with our Department of Finance and Administration, and then our partner agencies to really get this work moving now in preparation for the next fiscal year. We are working on finalizing the details of that 10 million food security innovation grant program, and I'll have more details on that as we develop them. And so, yeah, more information on that soon. But again, really looking at ways to invest in innovative strategies in different parts of the state to address food insecurity while also investing in our local food system. Our strategic plan, we're hoping to release ASAP over the next month or so. And then the Food, Farm, and Hunger Steering Committee, for those of you that participated, we will go back to not meeting weekly for 6+ hours for some of us that attended multiple meetings, but we will reconvene quarterly to, again, make sure that that two-way communication and that accountability piece is protected in the next phase of the work. And so with that, Denise and all, thank you. And I look forward to the conversation. I'm going to pull this off the screen so that we can see each other, but stand for any questions, suggestions, concerns, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kendal. I feel bad that we tried to box this conversation into a half an hour. Challenges of an online virtual conference where the push and pull of wanting to cover a lot and yet not wanting to people to be stuck on their computers all day long. So I apologize that it's a short period. And as you can tell, Kendal has been busy, and it's been really amazing to have her at the forefront of this push, because she came up through farm to table, worked at the public education department, worked with all the farmers on the New Mexico grown, so had a real solid understanding. So we're really lucky to have had her push this through. There were some moments where it didn't, we weren't really sure how it was going to go. But I want to go straight to the questions, because and I know a couple people have their hand raised, but Kendal, that I just want to mention a few things in the chat first. So someone asked about getting a copy of the budget. Will you be sharing the whole presentation that I can send, or at least the budget? And
Yeah, I will happy to share, and then I'll make sure that it's very crystal clear, which, yes, I'm going to do maybe add a few more edits, Denise, but I'm happy to share the slide deck with you.
Okay, that sounds good. And there was also a question from Jackie and Rayma. This is kind of a big question, but we'll just go right there. Is this any way connected to the climate crisis?
So I also have any of my team members wanted to jump in here. So what was loud and clear from many of those each of those 4 goal areas or work groups, is that this is should be no surprise to anybody that issues of water and land were absolutely critical to every single conversation that we had. And so in the plan, there are specific strategies and tactics around, for example, we need to identify what the benchmarks for conserving water and protecting soil are for New Mexico and build those into all the programs. So as an example, for the New Mexico Grown for Schools program, because that's the one I can speak to like in my sleep, we would build those benchmarks and those guidelines into the program so that farmers that are conserving water, conserving land, are the ones that are prioritized first for those types of programs. And so those are the strategies that are embedded into the plan that aren't coming out in the year 1 budget priority, but that are baked into the entire essence of the plan and of the programs, if that makes sense. We made it very clear in these groups that we weren't going to have specific water priorities, because there's as many of us know, a whole 50-year water plan that's happening alongside. And so what we're doing instead is making sure that those 2 pieces are connected. And then I would say, I'll stop there. I don't know if anybody from the groups wants to add in, or we can move to the next question. But I will say that that priority around, land conservation and water is important to our office. And so it'll be a main asset or aspect or facet of the strategic plan.
Thanks, Kendal. Yeah, there's a lot more we could probably say about, why the groups weren't able to get at some of the root causes of things. It was the same thing when our community food programs, addressing hunger, and yet we were not able to directly address the strategies for alleviating poverty within our small work groups within 6 months. So yeah, they're being addressed in different ways, I think, throughout the plan. Sylvia, please go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you for all you all are doing. It's an amazing symposium. I think there's one area that is missing that I would really like to see incorporated, really. And that is, there's an addressing of very separate things, like here's the senior citizens, and there's the children, and there's the college students. But there's an area that I think is really important, and that is familia, the family, domestic. And instead of what's the next word that most people think of is domestic violence. Well, that is a terrible shame. Whereas we need to be thinking of domestic environment. And it's going to be the familia and that whole attention to domestic aliveness that I think is going to be so important, because I think the family is really suffering. It's under it's fragmented, and it is and that is one of the areas I think that we all need, and we all have, we all have in some degree some type of domestic essence. And that is really missing. And I think that really needs some serious immediate attention, of how to get moms and dads to relate. And also the whole thing of recreation. What is good family recreation? People talk about, recreational marijuana, or they talk about, other things, casino or whatever as recreation. But what about family recreation that's really appropriate for the entire family, that really brings family together in a really positive way? And I think farming is a big player in this.
That's right. And the health, a lot of these programs are addressing food security and health, which absolutely is all about familia. Thank you.
And moms making food and dads making food for their families and sitting down together and giving thanks and not watching so much TV and being able to set aside the iPhone so they can talk to each other. And the grandmothers and grandpas sharing their knowledge and their wisdom.
Yep.
I mean,
thank you.
We need that no matter how modern or how ancient things are. That's going to be a consistent need forever.
You've got that right. Chris, is your hand up?
Yes, I'm here. I had trouble earlier. I'm really excited to see this. And the sad thing is I didn't even know it was happening. So my question is, it looks like some of the decisions have already been made, but where are we at with being able to at least give some more advice before everything is publicly released? Because I have a unique experience that a lot of people don't have in food distribution and marketing, as in a previous career I had. And so it's kind of leading how we're building our farm here, where we're actually a food service and distribution company more than we are a farm, to address a lot of the issues that this, the grants and things look like they're trying to address. But like I said, I didn't even know it was happening. I work 105 hours a week here on the farm. So it's something that's hard for me to keep a pulse on because we're doing work on the ground. So where are we at right now with someone like myself who understands the macro and the micro part of food problems, distribution, supply chain, things like that, and also the experience of the customer, get involved at this late of a stage?
Good question, Chris. So I would say that, and for those that participated, we did a so there's two pieces here. So we met weekly with 4 work groups for 2 hours a week for 6 months, and did constant outreach through existing networks. So I know Denise sent stuff out, and New Mexico First sent things out. But we also recognize that not everybody, A, has the privilege to attend meetings on a regular basis, or B, just, that and may not have time or interest, and just that's not the way that they necessarily want to share their knowledge, right? So we also, alongside that, did focus groups and informant interviews of people that we had identified across the state that we knew couldn't participate regularly, that had really important perspectives on things. So those 2 pieces were the strategies, and then we presented regularly to tribal leadership. So moving forward, the first iteration of the plan, it's a living and breathing plan. My boss, our governor, she's like a plan of doing things. So the plan is going to be, it's already set into motion. This first fiscal year 23 budget is the first iteration of the plan. The work is already starting. And alongside that, these quarterly meetings are going to be the chance for community and agencies to, again, add insight, add suggestions, add edits to make sure that 2-way communication piece is maintained across the 5-year plan. So that's the strategy now. I think as we get more capacity and more people to help this, especially at the agency level, there will likely be other opportunities for surveys and more focus groups and things like that. But as we currently sit, the quarterly meetings are going to be the way for people to add, again, their brilliance and insight into this living and breathing plan that we're all really excited to get off the ground 5 years ago. So that there's this push and pull between waiting and really needing to get the work going. And so I appreciate, Chris, the comment, and know that I'm thinking about that.
Because I was so excited to see like the breakdown and you talking about, transportation and cold storage and things like that. And my fear, like I was happy you're doing it, but then I'm sitting here thinking of myself and I'm like, well, crap, are we going to be able to be involved? Because we're already doing that. We just signed a contract to have a custom made 12 by 36 walk-in freezer and cooler, and a portable cooler and freezer to go on a flatbed truck, because my understanding of distribution, I built a commercial kitchen on our farm before we even have a barn. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'm also like, okay, we're doing all the things that I think people realize at the top level now know that we need to do, but I'm funding all of this myself with loans and going into debt. Whereas now you're rolling out something, and I guess if I wanted to plant a seed, I would like to be able to say that maybe people who are working on those things now can get that financial assistance, because we're really going out on a limb ourselves to try to build these things when you guys haven't rolled this out yet. And some sort of, going back and saying that people who are working on these things now can also get financial assistance as well, because it's tough for us.
Yeah, and again, Denise, I don't want to take too much extra time because we could literally go on about this all for days, but I will say that Chris, what you just shared, we heard 1,000 times across the work group. So that's not what you're sharing right now is not new or novel in any way. So I just want to say that, like, we hear you, we hear what people stated, and the financial assistance piece from the state and really helping with infrastructure is huge. As many of you know, we do have a challenge here with the anti-donation clause though. And so there's complications of the state funding. So there's a whole other layer of administrative challenges that we have here in New Mexico that are unique to our state. And so just know that what you just shared is all embedded across the strategic plan. And so we look forward to getting that out so that you can at least see what the direction is, and then invite you to provide feedback and guidance as we come back together.
Yeah, thanks. And, it's, as Kendall said, we could spend a really long time going over. There's so much to dig into here. And going forward, and this, as she said, this is year 1 of year 5. So there are more years for you to participate, Chris, and for others who are interested. And, if you're a member of the NMFMA, which I assume you are, because I know you're going to be doing Double Up Food Bucks, you'll be getting emails from us, and we invite participation. And so if you or others want to participate down the road, I'm sure there will be plenty of chance for additional participation in the months and years to come. So don't feel left out. And I think everyone will see a lot of, this is, why in my State of the Plate, I tried to allude to some of the funding that's going to be coming down in lots of programs. The New Mexico Grown program, there's going to be opportunities for ranchers and value-added foods. There's going to be opportunities probably for dairy, and the Fresh RX program and the Double Up program are growing. So there's going to be lots and lots of opportunity. And yeah, Kendall, again, I'm just so sorry to not, I think I broke the first rule that we learned about the other day from Sarah Silva, those of you who joined her presentation about inclusivity. And one of the first things about agenda setting is to have enough breathing room, because there just needs to be, and I think I broke that rule on this one. So thanks for covering so much, Kendall. And I know I'll send out your slides and anything else that you've got, and people can either contact Kendall, she's always responsive, or you can work through us. But this is just the beginning, as I think Carol put in the chat there. So thanks again for joining us, Kendall.
Thank you, Denise. Hey, and you feel free to pass on my contact information too if people would like it.
Yeah, if you want to put it in the chat before
I can do that too.
That would work well too.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Michael, you're going to take us to our next transition. It's kind of hard to sounded earthy. Then we zoomed into policy, and now we're going to go somewhere in between. So Michael, take it away.
Right. Thank you, Kendall, for that legislative update. I think it's very informative for everybody.
You're muted. You're muted.
Let's see, can you hear me now? Sweet.
You are
right.
still muted. It's like, what? Somebody
No, he's
took my
not.
microphone?
No, I can hear
I
Michael.
can totally hear
I
Michael.
can hear him
It's
fine.
you, Denise.
Oh, oh, good.
It's just Denise.
All right.
Michael,
So,
do you hit? No. Can you
Denise,
guys hear me? It makes me feel like, okay, you guys can hear me.
We
It's
can hear
just you, Michael. And I mean, I can at least, yeah, he's he's voiceless. Our master of ceremony is without
I
without
can hear him
voice.
fine.
So
I can hear him
okay,
fine.
so we're gonna go.
Yeah, it must be your button because we can hear him.
I didn't get that. Everybody else can hear him but you. Technology.